everyone. Welcome to Mental Health Bites. In this podcast, we'll cover a timely topic related to psychology, answer one of your burning questions, and leave you with a practical tip to improve your mental health every single day. Let's dive right in to the timely topic of the day. Today, we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome. This is a phenomenon that many people experience, but we rarely talk about openly. Have you ever felt like you don't deserve your achievements? Like you're fooling everyone around you, and that one day they're going to find out that you don't belong? That's imposter syndrome, and it impacts far more people than you might think. In today's episode, we'll explore what imposter syndrome is and the hidden ways it affects us personally and professionally, where imposter syndrome comes from, and the deeper underlying issues. I'll answer a listener's question about dealing with imposter syndrome in their career. And finally, I'll share a practical tip to challenge your inner critic and build a stronger sense of self-worth. Let's get started. Imposter syndrome refers to the internal experience of believing that you're not as competent as others perceive you to be. It's a persistent feeling that you're a fraud, even when there's clear evidence of your success. And here's the kicker: it affects people across all industries and all walks of life. According to research by the International Journal of Behavioral Science, an estimated 70% of people will experience imposter syndrome at least once in their lives. That's 7 out of 10 people feeling like they don't measure up, even though they do. So, what does imposter syndrome look like? Well, in your personal life, imposter syndrome might look like shrugging off compliments or saying, I just got lucky, feeling like you don't deserve success in your relationships, parenting, or personal goals, avoiding activities you want to try because you're afraid of failing, constantly comparing yourself to others, and feeling inadequate. So, for example, a new parent might feel like they're not as good as other parents around them, despite doing everything they can for their child. Or someone training for a marathon might think, I'm not a real athlete. I don't belong here, even after finishing months of rigorous training. In professional settings, imposter syndrome might look like over preparing for meetings or projects because you're afraid of being found out, turning down promotions or new opportunities because you think you're not ready or qualified, staying quiet in meetings or hesitating to share ideas, fearing that other people will think you're not smart enough, or feeling paralyzed by perfectionism, procrastination, or overworking to prove yourself. For instance, someone who lands a big promotion might think, they made a mistake giving me this role. I'm not ready for this level of leadership. Or a student who earns a scholarship might say, I don't actually deserve this. There were better candidates. Professionally, imposter syndrome can hold you back from asking for promotions, speaking up in meetings, or taking risks. You're constantly doubting yourself, overworking to compensate, or procrastinating because you fear failure. People with imposter syndrome often attribute their success to luck rather than their abilities or skills. This not only adds stress, but also prevents you from fully embracing your accomplishments. On a personal level, imposter syndrome can erode your self esteem, harm relationships, and create feelings of isolation. Over time, this leads to increased anxiety and even depression. So you might not know this, but even highly accomplished people experience imposter syndrome. Michelle Obama once said, I still have a little imposter syndrome. It never goes away. That feeling you shouldn't take me that seriously. What do I know? Maya Angelou also admitted, I've written 11 books, but each time I think, they're going to find out now. I run a game on everybody and they're going to find me out. Even Albert Einstein reportedly referred to himself as an involuntary swindler, despite his groundbreaking contributions to science. So, where does imposter syndrome come from? Well, a lot of it stems from a few different factors. The first is early childhood experiences. Overly critical parenting, unrealistic expectations, or growing up in a high pressure environment can make you internalize the idea that your worth is tied to performance. If you are often compared to siblings or peers, it can create a constant fear of not measuring up. The second factor is perfectionism. Perfectionists feel like their work has to be flawless to be acceptable. This type of all or nothing thinking makes any small mistake feel like proof of inadequacy. Third factor, comparisons. Constantly comparing yourself to others, especially in today's social media driven world, can amplify imposter feelings. Seeing everyone else's highlight reel can make your own efforts feel insufficient. And finally, systemic factors. For women, minorities, and underrepresented groups, imposter syndrome can be exacerbated by external biases, stereotypes, or a lack of representation in leadership roles. So while imposter syndrome feels like a problem that maybe only you're suffering from, as you can see, there's so many different factors that can actually lead to imposter syndrome. But the good news is you're not alone, and there is a way to address this so that imposter syndrome does not get in the way of your personal and professional goals. And we will talk about that later on in this podcast. But first, let's move on to the Q&A segment. One of our listeners wrote in and she said, "Hi, Dr. Judy. I recently started a new role at work and I feel completely out of my league. Even though I've been promoted, I can't shake the feeling that I'm not good enough and that I'll let my team down. What can I do? Please help." And this is signed Alyssa from Oregon. So, Alyssa, this is an awesome question because it highlights how imposter syndrome often strikes during big transitions, a promotion, a new job, or even starting grad school. So, here's what I recommend: acknowledge your feelings without judgment, first and foremost. It's completely normal to feel uneasy when you're stepping into a new role. So, instead of suppressing the feeling, just name it. Say, "I'm feeling like I don't deserve this, but I know this is just imposter syndrome speaking." Also, focus on your facts, not your feelings. Look at the hard evidence of your accomplishments and what brought you here. Write down a list of reasons why you earned this role: your skills, hard work, and potential. Share your experience too. Talk to a trusted mentor or colleague. Often you'll realize that they felt the same way at some point. Vulnerability can build connection and perspective. And finally, reframe any mistakes as growth. Remind yourself that no one's going to be perfect in a new role. You're going to make mistakes. Just set that expectation right now. That does not mean that you're a bad leader. Making mistakes is how we learn, it's how we become better. So learn to embrace that and not to see it as a sign of inadequacy. Good luck in this new role. I'm really cheering for you, Alyssa. Let's move on now to the practical tip of the day. Today's tip is all about challenging your inner critic. Here's how you can tackle it step by step. First, whenever you notice a negative thought, an imposter syndrome type of thought, identify it, write it down, and really take stock in what led you to having that thought. Usually it's a situation, there's some kind of trigger, either externally, or maybe it's an internal trigger, a memory of something in the past, or maybe another thought that leads you down this path. Either way, identify the thought and think a little bit about what led you to have this interpretation in the first place. The second step is to question its validity. Ask yourself, is there actual evidence to support this thought? Or are you making assumptions? Often, imposter thoughts are based on feelings, not facts, or they're very one sided. So make sure that you actually write down evidence for the thought and evidence against the thought. And for most people, there's going to be things in both columns. It's never going to be one sided where all the evidence is mounting that this negative thought is absolutely true. Then I want you to reframe the thought. Replace the negative thought with a balanced, realistic one. Instead of saying, "I don't belong here," say, "I'm new to this role, but I'm capable and I am learning every single day." And finally, act as if. This is straight out of dialectical behavior therapy. Act as though you believe this new balanced thought. Confidence often grows from action, and behaviors can influence thoughts just as thoughts can influence behaviors. So show up, do your best, and the feelings will follow, even if you don't feel like right off the bat you're feeling your best. So here's an example. If your inner critic says you're not smart enough to give this presentation, you can start by identifying the thought. And in this case, it might be something like, "I'm doubting my abilities." Then question it, gather evidence for and against. So you might write in one column, "I've done presentations before and they went well. I've prepared for this and received positive feedback on my work." And then reframe. Tell yourself, "I'm prepared and I have valuable information to share." And finally, act as if. Deliver the presentation confidently and remind yourself of the reframed thought afterwards. Imposter syndrome affects so many people, and remember, it's not a reflection of your abilities or worth. By challenging your inner critic and reframing negative thoughts into more balanced ones, you can take back control and start owning your success. Thanks for tuning in to Mental Health Bites with me. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, there's plenty more where that came from. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you never miss an update. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and leave a comment below with your thoughts or any questions you have. Also, feel free to share this video with your friends and family who might find it useful. Stay tuned for more helpful content, and until then, take care of your mental health.